Yo, what's good, everybody? Happy Monday. It's a wild start to the day. So we're back, myself, my homie, Mr. Tim Shields, and we've got some stuff to talk about. Obviously, we're meaning Kevin Durant. For some people, you would have been asleep when Woj dropped the original tweet saying that the Celtics had basically become one of the favorites in the trade sweepstakes, we can call it, for Durant. And then later in the day, Shams dropped a massive report with what Boston had reportedly offered and what Brooklyn had reportedly countered with. So we're going to get into all of this straight away. I think the first thing I want to do is say that if you're new to this channel, please make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, and leave a comment. And if you're listening on audio via podcast, then make sure you go and hit that follow button on any of the podcasting platforms that you may be listening from. First of all, man, I just want to check in with my boy Tim, see how Tim's doing before we dive too deep into this Kevin Durant situation. What's going on, Tim?
Well, my morning was pretty good up until when I checked my phone notifications. It's been pretty hot the past few days, as you well know. Broke 100 on Sunday, so I'm glad that it's dropped down a little bit. But again, I thought we were in this kind of lull with the season, but lo and behold, we've got these rumors coming out now, and I think there's some truth to it. I'm just wondering to what degree and as to why stuff is getting reported the way it is.
It's wild, man. I mean, let's just start. I mean, the best place to start is with what Boston have rumoredly offered and then what the Nets rumoredly countered with. So, reading straight from Sham's report on The Athletic, the Celtics offered Brown, that's Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and draft picks. It doesn't say how many draft picks, but we know Brad Stevens doesn't really care about draft picks. The proposal was rejected, and Brooklyn has asked Boston in any proposal to include Brown, Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart, draft picks, and potentially one more rotation player. Now that's a haul, dude. That means you're getting Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, draft compensation, and another rotation player. I'm assuming just to time to make the money work. And in return, you're getting Kevin Durant. Now I tweeted this out. I'm torn. On one hand, it's Kevin freaking Durant. Like it's one of the best players on the planet. On the other hand, and I've been very vocal about this throughout the entire will Boston get involved, won't they? Kevin Durant's getting old, and he's going to be making a ton of money during like the latter few years of this deal. I don't think that Jaylen Brown is necessarily a flight risk, although I do think the more his names keep getting floated in these rumors, the more likely he is. I mean, this happened with Anthony Davis as well, if we remember. Now it's happening with KD. I'm pretty sure it happened with a different guy in between those two, and maybe a Bradley Beal being that name. So
Deal.
it's not like since he's been in Boston, this is the first time he's been used as a make weight in trade discussions. It's happened a few times now. Now, if Jaylen Brown looks past this and he is willing to re-sign long term in Boston once the final 2 years of his deal are over, I'm against making this move because at that point Boston can be contenders for 5 to 8 years with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. If Brad Stevens has any, and I mean even a sliver of doubt that Jaylen Brown will re-sign and you could effectively lose him for nothing in 2 years, then maybe you make this deal, right? Then maybe you do say, okay, well, Kevin Durant puts us over the top now, potentially, and we're going to go and do that. And then the bigger question is what you lose defensively from Brown, from Smart, from whoever else is thrown into the deal. Does the additional offense and obviously the defense that KD brings make this so you're not a worse team afterwards? Now, you're not going to be as deep, but are you worse or are you better? And I think that's a question that only Brad Stevens and Ime Udoka can answer.
Yeah, and I think what you said about the extension, I think that should be the main crux of the conversation. To me, I don't think the Celtics even consider dealing for Durant unless it's a situation where Jason Tatum says, I want Kevin Durant by any means necessary. Or if Brad Stevens truly believes that Kevin Durant is the missing piece, I do have an issue with the age, him being 34. And again, that contract is going to be massive. But the plus side is that you've got him under lock for 4 seasons. Now, the issue that I would have is the sequencing of reporting here. So Woj comes out and says that the Celtics would be willing to include Jaylen Brown in any kind of talks. Like it's something that's out there, but there's no genuine like traction there. Then about 10, 15 minutes later, we get a report from Shams that has a detailed, specific offer that got turned down by the Nets, which was Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a pick. And then all of a sudden we're hearing counters of they want Marcus Smart in the deal as well. So I'm just wondering where like the buck stops there. Like what is truth? How much of it is posturing? How much of it is leveraging the Celtics? Because if you look at the trade market right now, everything is super complicated because of Ben Simmons being on the Nets. Miami can't send Bam and won't send Bam. Phoenix can't send Aiton now, and they definitely won't send Booker. Toronto won't send Scotty Barnes. Greenberg brought this up. Dan Greenberg put this out in a tweet. So it's like you're looking at that trade market, and it's like, do you really have to give up Jaylen Brown for this? Because granted, yeah, no one's going to be able to beat that offer. But what offer are you like competing with right now, right? Like what other offer is on the table that's going to be anything close to what Boston can offer? And that's where I really start to wonder because I just don't see. It's not that Kevin Durant's not valued. It's just how are you going to reach that insanely high asking price and still have a competitive squad at the end of the day without bringing in other teams? And all these young guys, you can't trade there because of that Simmons extension rule, like that rookie extension. You just can't have multiple players on that. So it gets really complicated. And I just don't know what to believe out of this. I believe that there's been talks. I just don't know how far they've actually gotten. So I guess my main question is, if the Celtics actually are considering going for Durant, what kind of assets do you actually have to give up? If they're talking about potentially trading Jaylen, Derek White, and a pick for Kevin Durant, okay. The fact is the Nets turn that down. So I'm guessing, really wondering why the Celtics would even consider it unless Jaylen Brown is a flight risk. If they think he's unlikely or they're uncertain about him re-signing, that's really the only world, and I think the Celtics would consider is if they don't really have a solid guarantee or a really solid feeling that Jaylen Brown is going to sign that extension. He's got 2 more years left in this contract. And if he wants to test unrestricted free agency, then it gets really sticky. Like you just don't, they have a chance to do something special here. And that is entirely like contingent on them sticking everything together, keeping everyone together, keeping this core of the Jays together. So if that is a chance of like that not happening, if Jaylen leaves in free agency and they know about that now, how does that change the way that you operate with this Kevin Durant situation?
I mean, and that's the thing, right? If you fit, like I said, if there's a sliver of any sort of murmur that Jaylen Brown wants to move elsewhere, and you've heard it from Jaylen Brown, I'm not saying you hear it on WEEI or 98.5 or you've read an article. So I mean, if Jaylen Brown has said directly to either Udoka or Stevens, hey, I kind of want to see what it's like to be the guy. I don't want to be playing as the number 2 forever. I proved in the NBA Finals and during the playoffs I'm capable of being that number 1 option. I want to go and see what that's like. I want to explore that. I want to get paid like that. If you've had that directly from Brown on an internal conversation, then, and that's something none of us are going to be privy to, then that is when, in my opinion, you start to be like, well, we'd rather get something back than let him leave for nothing. And guess what? If we trade him to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant, and then Kyrie Irving goes elsewhere because Durant's that first domino to fall, well, now Brown's going to be that number 1 scoring option on the team, and he's going to get it 2 years earlier than he would if he stuck around in Boston. So there's always that way to look at things, you know. Ben Simmons might be the number 1 ball handler. Brown will still be the number 1 offensive player on that Nets team, assuming Kyrie and Kevin Durant leave. Now, from a Boston's perspective, and I was completely against this when it was Damian Lillard, and I'll say this, I'm under no illusion that Durant is by far the better player between him and Damian Lillard. But at the same time, Durant will be earning $53 million in his age 37 season. Age 37, $53 million, 49 at 36, 46 at 35, and 42 in the upcoming season. So as you can see, rises each year. I'm not comfortable with giving someone like Durant that's had injury issues in the past, that there's no sign or there's no reason to believe he's going to have LeBron type longevity. You know, I understand that these stars of like, medical science has made it so players' careers go deeper into their 30s, can even push towards 40. We're seeing that in other sports as well. But at the same time, your production at age 37, am I meant to believe that it's going to be 25 and 10 a night, even at 37? Because if it's not, well, You only have to look over to the Lakers to see how they're dealing with an inflated contract and how they're struggling to get off of that deal. You know what I mean? Because Westbrook all of a sudden fell off the face of the earth in terms of production. Now, that's probably a fit issue, let's be honest. But the way the Celtics roster looks now might not be how it looks in 2025. And there could be a fit issue, and you now have an aging star on 53 million. And if you haven't won, then now Jason Tatum might be disgruntled. There's so many things to worry about, and there's a risk when you do any type of trade of this magnitude. It's not just because it's Kevin Durant, but I think that I've seen some people all for this deal and some people all against it, and that leads me to believe that the middle ground is probably the safest bet. I'm just not sure on how comfortable I am with potentially trading away Brown and Smart to bring in 34-year-old Kevin Durant. Now, the next 2 years, you're probably the better team. And if you have Durant over Jaylen Brown in that finals, do you win? You know, because and the one thing I see a lot of people kind of pointing out is Ime Udoka said during the playoffs, you know, when we take out Marcus Smart and put Derek White in there, the defensive drop off isn't that noticeable. Like it's a minimal drop off. There's just that one level above, right? So if you're keeping Derek White because you've put Marcus Smart in this deal, how much worse is your perimeter defense getting? It's going to, like, Smart's value comes in his ability to switch onto bigger dudes. Smart is switchable 1 through 5 legitimately. And I think that's where the value kind of decreases, but you can change your scheme a little bit to not necessarily lean into that as much. So at the minute, Durant as a swap, basically, with Brown and Smart, your team's probably better in the short term. But in the medium term, you could end up regretting that deal.
And it totally,
unless there's a banner.
Well, and again, that everything gets fixed with a championship. That's like the Kawhi Leonard deal. You get a 1-year rental, you win a title, and he rides off into the sunset going to LA. Or what happened with, AD and the Lakers. They poured all their assets, put all their chips on the table, and they got a title. Granted, it was a bubble title, but it's a title nonetheless. So I guess it just really depends on where the Celtics are at in terms of considering Jaylen's future and considering how big of a risk you're willing to take. Because make no mistake, like trying to make a trade for any kind of star where it involves moving multiple contracts, that's a gamble. And it's really just a matter of whether or not Brad Stevens believes that to be the best move for this roster. Now, I think adding Malcolm Brogdon helps their core, it helps their depth. It gives them a lot of contract flexibility. You can move on from Marcus Smart. You can move on from Derek White if you want to, or if you have to, but there's no pressing need to do that. Like, this is a team that made it to the finals. And the one thing that we talked about was, man, if they had like 1 or 2 more players that were solid rotation pieces that you could use to shore up your depth and throw out there when, Jaylen needs some rest, during the regular season, or you need to swap one of the guys out so you have someone on the floor that gives one of the Jays some time to rest while the other one runs a second unit. Like, if they had those depth pieces, they probably win a championship. Now, if you have Kevin Durant instead of Jaylen Brown, there's no way to know for sure, but like, you probably have a pretty damn good chance of winning an NBA championship with him and Tatum on the floor. It's just a matter of whether or not it's just coming down to risk for me. Like, I don't feel the pressing need to break up the Jays. I just don't believe that to be the path to a surefire championship, because nothing is certain. The Nets thought they had something certain with Durant and Irving together in Brooklyn, and that ended up not working out. And granted, it didn't end up working out in Boston with Kyrie either. They came pretty damn close to making the finals, but that was without him. So I'm a hard sell on it. Like, I'm really hard sold to try and make that kind of move when it could seriously shorten your window from 8 years to 4 to 3 years, in my opinion.
So the biggest thing for me is, in terms of why this deal would make sense, is right now, like it or loathe it, there's a huge minutes crunch in that 1 and 2 guard slot. You've got Marcus Smart, Derek White, Malcolm Brogdon. Jaylen Brown's going to be primarily playing at the 2, I'd assume. Then you've got Peyton Pritchard. Moving away from one or two of those guys really opens up some minutes. You know, you're going to get more Malcolm Brogdon. You're going to get more Derek White. You move Derek White to that starting guard spot because you want to keep Brogdon coming off the bench so you can manage his minutes. Peyton Pritchard could get some minutes, and you still have a couple of TPEs available. They're not huge, granted, but they're mid-level exception where you can go out and bring in another ball handler if needs be. If you're not sold on Pritchard be improving much more than where he is now, and you think you need a little bit more defensively or playmaking wise, you can go and make a deal where it's Pritchard plus X to fit somebody into the what is it, the Juancho TP is at like 6 million, right? You can do that deal. So there are options there that it's like, you know, the roster that you see now, if this deal was made, would be re-enhanced because that's what Brad Stevens has shown you that he'll do. Doesn't mean it'll be instantly. Boston will probably roll into the start of the season, see how they do, see where their weaknesses are, wait towards the trade deadline, and then try and make a deal or two. And that's kind of the Brad Stevens MO right now. So I'm not concerned too much. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think that you give up a defensive player of the year guard if you can get away with giving up Derek White. But if you're hell bent on bringing Kevin Durant in, and Brooklyn are hell bent on getting Marcus Smart back, because as to what I've said whenever I've spoken about a smart trade, is the fact of the matter is this dude is a culture setter. That's just the way it is. This dude comes in and sets a culture of defensive intensity and winning mentality. Now, if you're hell bent on having that come in so because you know you're going to be getting young and you need somebody to be that tone setter, Boston needs to be like, well, yeah, are we comfortable with losing Marcus because we've got White and because we've got Brogdon? Are we comfortable with losing Jaylen because we get back Kevin Durant? Whoever that third rotational player is inconsequential at the moment because their name hasn't been added to the report. So we could surmise and whatever. Keep Rob Williams out of that, out your mouth. You know what I mean? As long as Rob Williams is kept out of your mouth, we can figure it out. I'm okay with it. I still feel like this deal could go either way in terms of success. I feel like the window's shorter, the pressure all of a sudden really ramps up. All eyes are on you. But I think that if Durant comes in motivated, you know, him and JT are close. They became close during their time at the Olympics. Durant was very vocal in trying to usher Tatum into being more of a dominant scorer. If you're like, there's easy ways and multiple reasons to talk yourself into this deal. None less than if Jaylen Brown wants to be the head guy on a team and this opportunity gives him that, then you have to consider it for the good of his career because at least then he looks back with his time in Boston fondly rather than in 10 years' time there's a podcast release where Jaylen's like, man, they held me too long. I'm glad I left after the contract. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of ways to look at this, but right now it's still a rumor. I'm down for Durant if the reasoning behind it's correct and if the deal doesn't got the depth that Brad Stevens has worked the last 2 years to build.
Yeah, and I feel like just after the moves they've made this summer to really shore up, like bringing in Brogdon, bringing in Gallinari, I'm just really hesitant to try and give that up because you just don't know. You don't know what this team can do now. Like you saw them come out from the finals, and the big issue, like I said before, was not having some depth guys, not having enough shooting. You know, you could have benefited from having another guard in that rotation that you could lean on because Peyton Pritchard just wasn't bringing it in the finals. So you added Brogdon, and now you've got this. You've got a three-headed beast at guard, and you've got the Jays. You've got Rob locked up long term. You've got Al's contract coming off the books. You can get him on a cheap extension after that point. Gives you a little bit of financial flexibility, especially with Brogdon's money coming on the table. So you have to know that Jaylen's not staying long term in order to justify looking at this. Like every team's going to do their due diligence, but who are you trying to compete against for a trade? Like, is there any kind of offer that's out there that's going to beat what Celtics can offer? And if you're offering this, is this because you think this is going to unlock a new gear for Jason Tatum, like playing alongside a guy like KD? What kind of offensive gravity, like how does that change the Celtics offense beyond just KD being, you know, a generational offensive player? Like how does that change this entire system offensively? So I'm going to say I'm in the middle ground here. I think if you think that Jaylen's going to leave or you think that he's shaky on staying, then yeah, you have to consider a Durant move. But again, it does come down to whether or not you're gutting your entire rotation to do it. If you're giving up Marcus and Jaylen and picks, that's a tall order. I'm going to need something else coming back with Durant. Maybe a guy like Seth Curry. So you add another guy into the rotation for guards. He's a guy that I like a lot. But I don't know. I hate this. You're starting off the week on this note. It just seems so rough.
All I will say is the notion of Jason Tatum taking a step back into a second option, to me, seems like it could be the way to help him grow into taking that final step. Because all of a sudden the defensive attention's not on you as much. You're still probably going to be the primary ball handler, primary creator, and KD is going to do a bit of that too. But I just think the defense can't hone in on you as much. Sometimes I feel like defenses disrespect Jaylen Brown a little bit, especially during the regular season. You're not going to disrespect Kevin Durant. So this could be a good thing for Tatum. I'm talking myself into this and I don't know how. There are reasons I'm completely against it as well. Obviously, this is all reports and rumors at this point of the day. I'm not assuming anything gets done in the next 24 to 48 hours. I'm not assuming anything gets done in the next week. But there's a genuine possibility that it does. So I think we all need to be braced for that. But as for now, as somebody that covers the team every day, 7 days a week, at 24 hours a day, I'd enjoy covering Kevin Durant. I think that's my last thought.
Yeah, I mean, KD is one of my favorite players in the league that's not a Celtic, and he came really damn close to coming here before. So I guess in that way, it would be history kind of coming full circle, going back and righting a wrong of the past. His time in Golden State was really successful, but I think this Brooklyn trip has probably given him a little bit of perspective. But who knows? It would be fun to cover him. I'll say that much. He's a very fun player.
And with that, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, that like button, leave a comment. Make sure to interact with us. You can find us over on socials. You'll see the socials on the screen if you're looking. If you're listening via audio, you already know where to find us. I really appreciate y'all tuning in, either visually or audio, or audioly. Vocally, I'd assume.
Auditorially?
Auditorially, there we go.
I don't know this.
Until next time, which will be later in the week, we appreciate y'all. Stay safe, enjoy the week, and hopefully we get some news on this one way or the other, because it'd be nice to go into training camp with a set rotation or a set roster at least.
I just want closure, man. I just want closure. I thought we had it.
It's the fog of the off season fog. Right then, y'all stay safe.
Cheers.